Alright, welcome back to my boss build series, and I am on Striker today, Arc Titan, doing a Master RHULK checkpoint, which I had previous to this making this video had never done anything Master on Vow of the Disciple. RHULK is one of my favorite bosses, so I just kind of wanted to do something, seeing as it was the weekly featured raid. And although I'm getting this out probably too late for any of you to actually make use of the information that I'm giving out in this video, maybe for the next time that Vow comes around, you'll have some tips and tricks here on how to do good damage to RHULK, and just generally surviving the encounter, because this is a deathless run. I'm including here the last damage phase of our failed completion, because this is what happens. It's just to show what happens when you get greedy and decide to try and two-phase RHULK, which is very doable on normal difficulty, but on Master, kind of like Nezrek, it's just way safer to just plan out 3 phases. If you get him below that final threshold, then he gets enraged, and then you have to kill him or you wipe. So basically the trick is, even if you're doing really good damage, just switch to primaries or stop doing so much damage when he gets really close to final stand. Yeah, so we just had a whole bunch of people. Keep in mind, this is a random LFG group. It started off with one guy just looking for people. So this is 5 completely random players, I believe. Nobody even knows each other. Of course, we're all on mic to make it go easier and smoother. And we completed it with challenge and got some good loot. But this is what happens, and it was fun. I didn't mind pushing it, but there was a couple people that just said, "Oh yeah, let's do it!" And of course, you know, everybody runs out of heavy ammo, and we have no supers for final stand. So that's what happens. Anyways, so here is the actual completion, and my role in this encounter. And by no means am I an expert on this raid in any way. In fact, this is one of the more difficult raids that I've done the least amount of. I think I have 30 or 40 clears on this raid, but that is by far mostly RHULK checkpoints, just for farming my weekly, getting my guaranteed weekly red borders from the spoils table at the end, and trying to get collective obligation. And I finished crafting all the weapons, and I got the exotic about 2 or 3 seasons ago. So it's been that long since I've done this, done anything involved with this raid, and so I thought it would be fun to get back into it and do it on Master. The only difference on Master, of course, other than the fact that the difficulty is ramped up and you're capped at 20 below power, so all enemies are more difficult, you have more champions to deal with. And it's not really an issue because there's just 1 unstoppable and 1 overload. And I have conditional finality on me in case the unstoppable gets past my teammates and gets close to me in the middle here while I'm dealing with the leeching force. So I'm a splitter, that is my role. And I've also got a trace rifle to deal with overloads. Also, I want to use double special so that when I get to damage phase, I can swap to my damage loadout, which is also double special, using Wither Horde and iterative loop fusion rifle, which is mainly just for backup in case I run out of linear, which I never do. But also, if you use double special ammo, it's been officially stated by Bungie, it is a bug, you get more heavy ammo drops. So may as well make use of it while we still can. You'll notice I actually just switched to Wither Horde off of conditional finality. That's because I'd actually done this run a couple times before this one with a different fire team, and I got a completion there as well. But we had my teammates were struggling with the unstoppable at times because they're focused on, you know, doing their task with the mechanics like dunking and reading and all that. And so while I was standing on the middle plate splitting with the other splitter, sometimes the unstoppable would get through and everybody would panic and there would be deaths. So I was using conditional finality previously, which is just a quick way to, I mean, both modes on conditional finality stuns unstoppables. You can shatter them or you can ignite them. Either way, it's going to quickly deal with them. So that's why I was using it. But with this particular fire team, like, these guys were dealing with the unstoppable just fine, so I felt fine just switching back to Witherhoard, saving that loadout, and then I don't really have to deal with, well, I could be more useful at range with Witherhoard compared to conditional finality, instead of, you know, having a shotgun, which is only useful if the unstoppable gets close. So Witherhoard is not only what I'm using for damage, but of course I can use it to just kind of help out with ad clearing. So I did that. The two loadouts that I'm using are, well, I'm on Striker, and so of course I've talked in pretty much every single one of these boss builds videos about how to hot swap your loadouts properly. One thing that I've discovered hot swapping loadouts is I used to be very critical about swapping loadouts. I didn't like it as a mechanic. And keep in mind that previous to the last couple seasons where I've been focused on builds and like legendary campaign missions and this boss build series, I was doing solo flawless nightfalls and weekly campaign missions, which are all locked loadouts. And I actually like locked loadouts for those activities specifically. And because I was doing so many of those activities, I just kind of developed a, you know, comfort or habitual way to play the game by, you know, just having the forethought to make my loadout work for the entire mission. And so I was kind of like, you know, the whole concept of hot swapping loadouts was just kind of disruptive to my idea of how I should be playing the game. Now that I'm doing different types of content, and also now that we have loadouts, I actually am having a ton of fun with this, even on console, even with the slow cursor speed. Just having two loadouts in pretty much every single raid or dungeon or endgame activity that is not with locked loadouts like nightfalls and weeklies. There's a moment where you can take the time to swap your loadout just fine. You have plenty of time to do it. So I've been doing that, and the trick to doing that is anybody can do this. It's super easy, but people do discover that they have issues with it because they don't know that, and I don't blame them for not knowing this because I wouldn't know, you know, without experiencing it myself. But basically, you need to have the same super on both loadouts, obviously the same subclass, the same aspects and fragments in the same order. So what you can do is you can basically make your one loadout focused on what fragments you want that are best going to suit your setup, like doing the mechanics of the encounter, and for damage. Pick the best of both worlds, maybe focusing on damage, boss damage first, survivability second, and so pick your subclass aspects and fragments based on the entire encounter. Put that on one loadout, and then copy that loadout onto your second loadout, and then you're just going to switch up some mods on your armor, and that's basically it. So that's a good way that you can do. You can set up two loadouts from the start, is just by starting with the subclass that you want to use for one loadout, copy it to a second loadout, and then you don't really have to worry. So for my first loadout here, the exotic that I'm using Eternal Warrior, but it's not for any particular reason. In fact, if I realize if I was to do this again, like optimally, and maybe like be a better help to my team, sitting back on the plate here, being a splitter, I could have used like armamentarium or Heart of the Most Light so that I could have thrown more pulse grenades or storm grenades. Honestly, I probably would have used storm grenades as well. I'm using pulse grenades because technically they do more damage than storm grenades to non-moving enemies, and it feeds you ionic traces as it does damage, so you get more ability energy back from throwing Touch of Thunder pulse grenades. So just generally speaking, pulse grenades are better, but storm grenades would be better for the role that I was doing in this raid, which is sitting back on the plate, not seeing where the enemies are. I could chuck a storm grenade, let it do some work. And also, because RHULK is moving around so much that he's often not stationary for long enough for a pulse grenade to do its maximum damage, a storm grenade might be better for RHULK. So that is one critique that I would give myself in doing this encounter. If I was to run it back, I'd maybe use storm grenades and armamentarium or Heart of the Most Light during setup. So yeah, so I'm just using Eternal Warrior because it's already a loadout that I had saved from, I think, one of my previous videos where I was doing Atlas, and I've used this build in GMs a few times as well, so I didn't want to, make a completely different arc subclass. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter for setup. I'm sitting back on the plate, being a splitter. I'm not in the thick of things with enemies, so I can basically just use whatever. Frankly, I could have just kept Curse of the Falling Star on. The thing with Eternal Warrior is you do get a stacking arc weapon damage buff, which is equivalent to 4 arc weapon surge mods, which you cannot equip on your legs. You can only equip 3. So instead of getting like the maximum of 22% extra arc weapon damage from triple arc weapon surge mods on your legs, with Eternal Warrior you can get 4 times that at 25% extra damage instead of 22. But you really have to be killing stuff with arc, and you have to be in the thick of ad clear, basically in order to actually make use of that buff that Eternal Warrior gets. So here I am in the second damage phase. I'll cover that a bit. If you notice, I was punching the Thrall. Every time the Thrall were spawning, I was kind of making sure that I can punch them so that I can proc knockout, so that I can get amplified. Every melee, whether it's a charged melee or uncharged melee, is going to make you amplified. I'm pretty sure on the first melee it will, or maybe knockout has to be procced first before you can get amplified. But this is actually key because I'm doing the most damage out of my fire team here, and I think part of that is because I am swapping loadouts so that I have a full 45 seconds of triple arc weapon damage buff on my for my arc weapons, but also because I am making sure that I'm casting my Thunder Crash when I am amplified, right? So if I don't cast my T-Crash, like basically as soon as damage phase starts, then my amplified will likely run out because there's no ads to kill. And then I will lose out on a potentially 30% extra super damage, right? Because Thunderous Retort from the Seasonal Artifact mod gives you that massive damage buff to your super, to arc supers. So this is very good, but it does take some practice. You need to be aware of like your amplified timer, right? A lot of the times, like during that pre-damage phase, when you're up at the top there, just killing Thrall, or you're focused on the symbols. Either you're focused on dunking and getting emanating force and all that. So sometimes it's not practical to be killing ads, but my role in this specifically was more laid back, right? I'm being second splitter, which is basically just shooting the left crystal whenever my teammate that is also splitting needs me to, And then when I'm up at the top, there's 2 people dealing with reading and dunking, right? So the other 4 can just kind of do whatever. So I was playing one of the more laid back roles in this raid, in this encounter. So I was able to kind of just focus on getting amplified before each damage phase started. So that's what I was doing, and in the end, the teammates were kind of like, "Oh my God, how did you do nearly 5 million damage?" Which wasn't that much more than other players, but it was significant enough that, like, even Starter Scales Hunters with Gathering Storm, like, I was out damaging them because I was being mindful of getting amplified first and then casting that Thunder Crash to get that extra super damage. So as far as the builds go, obviously I go over them all at the start of the video. I'm just looking at Dim here right now. For my survival setup, I'm producing Orbs of Power and ammo. I think everybody on the fire team was using Heavy Ammo Scout. So heavy ammo was pretty much not an issue. And then this Path of Least Resistance Trace Rifle, I crafted this, well, back in Season of the Seraph, but I put Shoot to Loot and Volt Shot on it. And it's just because I really wanted to have a Shoot to Loot weapon. As soon as they introduced, actually it was this season, they made it so that you can shoot orbs and ammo bricks. So while I'm sitting back here watching all these orbs being generated inside of RHULK's kind of darkness force field that you can only enter, I think, if you're a dunker, right, with emanating force. So all the other, everybody else that's not dunking just has to sit there and look at those orbs and you can't go and collect them. So because I have a shoot to loot weapon, I can make sure I'm full on heavy. I can shoot every orb of power that I see so that I get my super back before damage starts, and so that I can make sure that I have my 3 stacks of armor charge. So this was probably the most fun I had outside of the damage phase with this run, even though I was doing a fairly boring role of shooting a crystal every 20 seconds or so and splitting the leeching force with my teammate. I was just having fun with my shoot to loot weapon, and so that was kind of the highlight for me, other than doing damage. So I was using that to, like I said, get ammo, get armor charge. I'm using all the siphon mods to produce orbs. I think I'm using Ashes to Assets. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm using Harmonic Siphon. So I can make use of Volt Shot and this Trace Rifle to kill basic ads while I'm sitting there doing the Leeching Force. And then when I get to my damage loadout, then I'm swapping obviously to Triple Arc Weapon Surge mods, and Harmonic Targeting for faster aim down sight time, Harmonic Loader for faster reload speed. This Stormchaser that I'm using is, okay, so here's one thing I should have probably talked about already, but I'm losing time on this video already. But Stormchaser can still outperform Thunderlord, right? Oftentimes you'll get in these raid teams, and when the boss damage type of damage that you want to do to the boss favors precision damage, like RHULK, is dangerous to use rockets. It is doable, but it's just easier to have a div bubble up and hit them with precision damage, and it's just kind of a more consistent way to do damage and survive. And Stormchaser, so what I was going to say was, a lot of times fire teams will be discussing, what we're going to use for damage. Everybody says Thunderlord, get your Thunderlord on. I just stay quiet. I don't say anything because I know that my firing line Stormchaser still does more damage than Thunderlord. So most of the other players here were using Thunderlord. I was using Stormchaser, which also allowed me to get some Witherhorde shots off. And yeah, so I think just the little edge that I had there with firing line on Stormchaser and being amplified before I cast my 3 T crashes total, that allowed me to do 4.7 million damage, which is a little bit more than my teammates. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all there is to it. I can get a couple grenades off, but, you know, I already realized that there's some things that I could have done to optimize here. And so these are my first 2 adept weapons from this raid. And I got a Deliverance with Demo and Chill Clip, which is cool because my non-adept crafted weapon has enhanced Chill Clip and enhanced Compulsive Reloader. So this offers me something a little different, including Bait and Switch as an option on there. So Demo and Bait and Switch, like, that means that potentially Deliverance could be like a tractor cannon supplement, like a special weapon that I could use for damage. So I might have to visit that at some point in the future. Anyways, other than that, yeah, just go ahead, take a look at all the fragments that I'm using. You know, at the risk of being very long-winded, I've talked about these types of things, swapping loadouts and everything like that in all of my boss builds videos. This isn't a crazy video. It's not too nuanced, just a basic striker build that you can use to survive Master RHULK. Also, don't forget to look at all the seasonal artifact mods, because those are key, like electric armor for all that damage resistance. On top of Thunderous Retort. Anyways, hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.